Hello and welcome back to the Long Live Rock and Roll podcast. Yes's Close to the Edge was a bold, innovative leap that transformed how rock albums could be constructed, both musically and thematically. Its long compositions, technical prowess and depth of concept pushed the boundaries of rock music and inspired a generation of musicians to explore the more progressive aspects of rock. To this day, the album remains a pinnacle of what progressive rock could achieve and continues to be admired for its pioneering vision and legacy. Joining me to discuss this album is my co-host, Mr. Felipe Amarin. How you doing, bro?
Doing great, man, and you?
Yeah, very well, thank you, very well. Really excited for this episode, and I'll tell you why. So we did it for new viewers and listeners, actually quickly terms and conditions. If you're watching on YouTube, make sure you hit like on this video and subscribe to us so you stay up to date with our new content. If you're listening on Apple, Amazon, Spotify, scroll down, give us a review, write a few words about the show if you like it, and it shoots us up the charts and we get seen by more people, so it'd be a massive favour to us. Now, for new
thumbs
listeners,
up and click on the bell or whatever that is on the on YouTube.
Felipe,
click on everything, you know.
Felipe,
Those
now
things,
you've said there has to be a bell. I've got to put one there. I don't normally put a bell
There's
there.
no. Oh, really?
So now I've got to do that. Okay. Okay. I'll try and put a bell where Felipe said. Anyway, for new listeners, we spoke about Yes. I think it was episode 25, so all the way back a good year or so ago. And actually, the result of that episode led to several family members of mine having a go at me for my opinion on Close to the Edge. And I was there,
I don't remember what was it.
So I don't remember either. So I've had family members that I haven't seen for a while, and they've gone, "Oh yeah, I've been listening to the podcast. Yeah, it's really good. Don't agree with your opinion on Yes, by the way." And I was like, "Oh shit! Like, what did I say? I don't even remember what I said." I said, "Oh, can you tell me what I said?"
Lars Unleashed.
I know. Can you believe it? So I just want to start this. I know we normally start with the album info, which we'll get to, but I want to start by saying Felipe chose this album. Felipe, I get it. I get prog rock. Yeah. I got it. And I've played prog before. I've listened to lots of prog. Court of the Crimson King is one of my favourite albums. A lot of Pink Floyd stuff I love. But this, it's like I'm gonna insult it before saying I love it. This overly long, wanky, lots of solos, all of this stuff that I didn't get before, I get it now, and we'll get into that in the episode. So, album info. Close to the Edge by Yes was released on the 8th of September 72, recorded between April and June 72, which is crazy, that's only a couple of months, at the Advision Studios in London. The genre is quite obviously progressive rock. The length of the album is just under 38 minutes. It was released on the Atlantic label, and it was produced by the band and Eddie Offord. So, first, we're going to do a little bit of background, just to give you guys a little context of what was going on. I'll kick off, I think, Felipe, because I'll talk about prog, and then you're going to talk a bit about what led Yes to this point.
Oh, so wait a minute. Prog, like all prog songs are really long. If you're going to give us a brief history of prog, I'm going to go make a cup of tea and come back. That's going to take a while.
Yeah, there you go. I will do my best to be concise. So this is just how we got to prog in the early 70s. So in pop music, you got advances in recording technology being utilised by the likes of the Beatles and the Beach Boys. And those two bands essentially were proving that pop could be a bit more than just romantic dance music. So they were experimenting. You know, the Beatles in Revolver did the thing where they turned the tape backwards, which is a unique method. Classical music. A lot of bands were starting to adopt classical compositions, symphonic structures, ambitious concepts. You know, you've got the Moody Blues and Procol Harum are good examples of doing that. Another side note, guys, any song we mention, including the full album, is going to be in a Spotify playlist down in the show notes. So these songs and bands I mentioned, they'll be down there so you can hear an example of what we're talking about. As well as this, we had Emerson, Lake and Palmer playing a lot of classical stuff, weren't they? In their early career, they were playing lots of classical covers. Yeah. In terms of jazz and blues, you had a lot more complex time signatures being brought in. You know, in early jazz in the 30s and 40s, it was much more straight as in simple time signatures. Now you get free jazz, where Miles Davis and John Coltrane and all these guys are going off. The
early jazz was designed for the dance floor, isn't it? And then it became more experimental.
Exactly. So with jazz, you got the complex time signatures, the improvisational nature of solos. You got like King Crimson were very jazz influenced, Soft Machine, and Bill Bruford, who is the drummer of Yes for this album, was a he really brought a jazz feeling to this rock album, which I'm sure you'll
Yeah.
talk about later. In terms of psychedelic rock, out of that, which we were talking about, the Beatles, came a sort of movement that embraced the idea of concepts and themes. And then you kind of had bands like Pink Floyd setting an early standard of what this psychedelic rock that kind of borders on progressive rock was showing. This out of this world themes, lots of soundscapes, lots of electronic experimentation. So pre 1972 in Prog, this is the general thing of what you've got. King Crimson did In the Court of the Crimson King, 1969. Genesis did Nursery Crime, 71. Emerson, Lake and Palmer did Tarkus, 1971. And Genesis did Foxtrot in 1972. So this all preceded where we are and what contextually was happening with Prog before Yes released Close to the Edge. And that is my concise, quick history of Prog before this album. So why don't you give us a little background and context on what Yes were doing in the lead up to this album?
Well, so I've got to mention two albums that came immediately before this one. So one was Yeah's album, which is the first one with Steve Howe on guitar. When he joined the band, that was, I think, the first big change in that sound, where the guitar actually became a more essential part of that sound, and he brought a lot of influence of jazz and folk music into it. So that was the first big change. And then after the Yeah's album, Tony Kaye left the band, the keyboard player, and they had Rick Wakeman joining them. Rick Wakeman brought a lot of classical music into it, of course, but he was a real experienced session musician. He worked with a lot of big names, and he knew how to operate in studio. He knew how to get results quickly, which might explain why the album was recorded so quickly, as I said, only a couple of months. But also they rehearsed a lot. He was, he was a little bit of a music director as well, I guess, for the band, probably at the time. I can't say that for sure, because most of that role was actually done by John Anderson. But anyway, so when Rick Wakeman joined the band, they actually created the classic lineup of Yes, which only did 2 albums.
There you go. And that classic lineup is John Anderson on vocals, Steve Howe on guitar, Chris Squire on bass, Rick Wakeman on keyboards, and Bill Bruford on drums. In 1972, this must have been like, okay, this is just a new up-and-coming prog rock band. We look back at it now, and you see legend, 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 legend in their respective instruments.
Exactly. Bill Bruford was one of the first musicians to record an album that was considered fusion, which is another genre of music. And Rick Wakeman had a ridiculously successful solo career as well, with mostly instrumental music. And, all those guys, they are, like huge names in the music industry now.
Virtuosos in their own field.
Yeah, and they have big names now. But at the time, they were just like kind of getting started with experimentation and all this stuff. And I think the interesting thing about this is Steve Howe said that this album is part of a trilogy for him, which starts with Yeah's album. So you got Yeah's album, you got Fragile, and then you get Close to the Edge as the third and final part of the trilogy. It's when they're kind of finding a sound.
Is this trilogy based on the band members, the musical concepts, or the lyrical themes?
I think it's the music direction they were taking. That's the sound, because they were trying to achieve something, and in their path to achieve that sound, some people quit the band or got sacked from the band, because they're like, that's where we go. I think I've mentioned this when we did the episode about Yes. John Anderson did a really great analogy about the constant change of lineup in the band. He said, like, you get into a bus, the bus is going to a certain place, a certain direction. It will stop every now and then, but it's going in a certain direction. If you no longer want to go that way, you have one thing to do. You got to get off the bus. And someone else is going to get into the bus, and that person is more important. So they were kind of really objective with that, with changing people. It's like, sorry, you're no longer necessary. You can go.
Yeah. But undoubtedly, for this classic lineup, it was the ideas that came from these guys that made this music so good.
Exactly,
So let's get into the album finally. I just have to say I've really enjoyed it, and I'm not one for. I don't need to go over it again. If you're a listener, you've known from before. I don't really love prog, and I struggle sometimes to stay interested in the long songs and everything. But I tell you what hit different today is that the music was just so seamless. Now, one example is I'm going to give you Pink Floyd's Echoes. I love that song, and that's probably one of my favourite Pink Floyd songs. However, that 5 minutes in between, where it's just the noises, and the same with Dogs by Pink Floyd, actually, I'm okay to check out. I'm okay to just go on my phone a bit, check my messages, whatever. But do you know what I mean? I'm not saying it
Yeah,
makes
I
the
know.
song worse. I'm just saying, okay, we're going to hear Stone, Stone for about 7 minutes. So I can just let you go on. That's fine, Pink Floyd. You carry on.
Yeah,
Excuse me
some of
while I
it is
just
just noise, isn't it?
yeah, yeah. So, but the thing that I didn't understand before that I'm now understanding with bands like Yes is that there isn't much of those gaps. There's a lot happening throughout the song, and just looking at the breakdown of Close to the Edge and the four sections of it, it's just phenomenal because they go seamlessly one into the other, and there's no extended 3 minute gaps of silence or 3 minute gaps of just one note being held on a keyboard. It's always interesting.
And I'll tell you why those parts work well together. There's two things. So I've mentioned Rick Wakeman's ability in studio. For instance, like he was really concerned about the organ part on Close to the Edge going into a Hammond after. It's like and making that sound, that transition sound as smooth as possible, as they were not
Yeah,
recorded in the same place. Anyway, but I think the guy who is the real boss in studio was John Anderson,
yeah.
because he had a clear vision for the album. He wanted to be like a symphony. And when
Wow.
you listen to classical music, the parts can be like considerably different, but there is a glue. There is some sort of connection between the parts, and classical composers, they really careful with transitions, like how you go from this part into another part. You might just go into total silence and then start a new section. That's also fine. But I think they were extremely careful with this. And if you compare to Fragile, that's why I believe so. If someone think about this, we cover a lot of different bands here in the show, so we think like, when are we going to do Yes again? Maybe in another year. Why didn't we do Fragile, which is the most popular album, right? So I would say why I chose this one, and I think you would agree with me. Fragile is not necessarily a band album because there's 5 songs in the album. They're individual pieces
Hmm.
written by each of the musicians separately, and some of them
Yeah.
recorded by just one of them. Like there's no participation of any other band members whatsoever. Basically, because they just got that lineup together. So they had about 4 songs they actually written and performed together, and
Probably
everything
wasn't
else
a
was
lot.
just yeah. There was
Yeah,
just
probably wasn't a lot of trust.
yeah,
Yeah.
and it was just like gathering different pieces of composition and putting them together. Whilst with Close to the Edge, you actually have an album with a plan, and that's
Hmm.
something that I watched a lot of the interviews with Steve Howe when he goes on about we knew what we were doing. Rick Wakeman also said that we knew exactly what we were doing.
I think it
We had the
shows.
whole plan in our heads and how to go from A to B every time. But
Well,
then
let's
that's yeah,
talk. Let me
yeah,
talk now. You mentioned classical. Let's segue into the classical aspects.
yes.
Excuse me, guys. You have to forgive me. I'm a little bit ill. Bear with me. So, classical elements were brought hugely into this album, and something I want to touch on is that you mentioned that John Anderson said they wanted to sound like a symphony. Well, they have actually touched 2 different types of classical music here. There is a kind of classical music called a symphony, which everyone knows. You know, you have Beethoven's First Symphony, and that's 4 pieces of music that are linked through maybe keys, melodies, passages, little motifs, instrumentation maybe. But they're generally all part of one symphony, but they're 4 different songs that make up a symphony. We've got this, so we've only got 3 songs on Close to the Edge, but 2 of them use that. So the song Close to the Edge has 4 parts: Solid Time of Change, Total Mass Retain, I Get Up, I Get Down, and Seasons of Man. And You and I also has 4 parts: Chord of Life, Eclipse, The Preacher, The Teacher, and Apocalypse. Now, something really clever that these songs. So not only do they follow symphonic structures in that way, they also follow something which is it's a musical structure called a sonata form. And for any of you who are not classically trained, sonata form is
Including me.
including you. Yeah, that's fine. There's 3 sections of a piece. So one of those 4 pieces in a symphony could be sonata form. Do you know what I mean? It's like a structure within a song. Sonata form is split into 3 sections: the exposition, which you play in the main key of the song, the development where things get a bit tasty, you might go and try some other keys or something, and then the recapitulation where you bring it back and use a motif or a melody from the first one or the same key, but you got your home, you go all the way with the development, and then you come back to the home afterwards. And this is what happens in Close to the Edge, because if you think about the choruses in Close to the Edge when he's singing, seasons will pass you by, and then you've got that in the first 5, 6, 7 minutes. Then you've got a good 8 or so minutes of the solos and the keyboard stuff and all the weirdness, and then it comes back at the end for the recapitulation, finding home again. So Close to the Edge, not only is it a 4-part symphonic song, it's also written in bloody sonata form. This is songwriting at its absolute best for 70s rock.
And isn't the album itself like 3 parts of a symphony as well?
Yeah.
Kind of.
Yeah.
You could divide in more parts, of course, but like, and they actually intended to have one song that would take a whole side of a vinyl.
I love it.
And 2 songs for the other side. So
which is
the last 2 songs are roughly 10 minutes each, and the first song is almost 20. So they actually split the album, like in terms of length, really well. And I think that's the number of songs in the album, the fact that they didn't divide them, because as I said, there's 4 parts in Close to the Edge, but the fact that they did not divide in 4 tracks, it's a statement. It's like, you know how far we can go with this? That's what we're going to do. This song is almost 20 minutes long. That's one song, one side of the LP.
I agree completely. I think each piece is just so perfectly crafted and composed. As you said, they knew what they were doing, and you can hear it, man. You can hear there's no... Listen, here's the other thing I wanted to say. Actually, you know what? I'll say that in my little pre-Felipe's monologue at the end. Quality, not quantity.
Yeah.
Some prog stuff. I mean, listen, I'm not slamming anything because I enjoyed the album, but Dream Theater, do you remember we did Awake?
Yeah.
That's a pretty long album.
Isn't it?
Long album, lots of songs, lots of themes. And I find less is more sometimes, because sometimes if you try too hard, or there's another, this is the 5th song in a row with a 3-minute guitar solo, that's when...
Well, the more songs you put into an album, the more you are running the risk of doing something that is not so good. Or not
the more you run the risk of people saying, oh, well, this song doesn't need to be here.
Yeah.
They might have put it in because the solo was really good. And that's when I think people start thinking about prog as being a bit pretentious. Like, well, actually, this song doesn't match up to the first 3. Why have they put... Oh, because it's got a really long keyboard solo. Okay, I guess the keyboardist had to have his solo. Do you know what I mean? But this... Unbelievable. Unbelievable, because the songs are of such different ilk. Let's talk about the songs a bit. Let's talk about Close to the Edge. The intro of Close to the Edge, that craziness... proper syncopated. It's not pleasant to the ear. It's not agreeable.
But it's kind of shocking, isn't it? When that guitar starts, like, what's going on here? And it's like, it's so busy. But that's the beauty of it. After about like 3 minutes, I guess, all of that craziness stops. And all together, all at once,
and it falls beautifully into like a Pink Floyd sounding thing, doesn't it?
Yeah, but it's almost like a funky groove that comes after that, isn't it?
Oh, yes, you're talking about the part after that.
Yeah, the first kind of verse, if you can call it a verse, it's probably around 3 minutes, I guess.
I think funky kind of reggae as well. Isn't it? Like,
exactly. It's hard to define what that is, isn't it?
Oh,
there's something about that intro which is interesting. The influence for that intro, especially the guitar part, was Mahavishnu Orchestra.
Oh, that's a big influence of Frank Zappa, yeah.
Yeah, the thing is, that's probably the weirdest lineup for a tour ever. Yaz was touring with the Kinks, right? Yeah.
What?
They were supporting the Kinks live. That makes no sense, right?
That doesn't make sense.
Imagine when they were touring Fragile. And then Mahavishnu Orchestra was added to the lineup. And it's like, what the hell is that?
Prog band, pop band.
Yeah, exactly. But then they saw them playing. The story goes that John Anderson and Steve Howe were watching their set, and they said, "I think we need to go back into the studio and practice."
Wow!
So you got to be as good as those guys.
They're good. Mahavishnu Orchestra were
Mahavishnu Orchestra.
Talented.
They are insanely good. So basically, that intro was inspired on their sound.
Wow! There you go.
Yeah.
What else have we got? I mean, this is just my notes about the album structure. I just thought it was great. They chose to focus on fewer, more complex music that really helped push the boundaries of audiences understanding the album. And I think this goes back to what you were saying about not splitting the 4 songs up. remember what I said in about the precursor to prog in the
Yeah,
'60s. You got the Beatles who did Rubber Soul, which as we discussed, we did an episode on that, and that was one of the first pop albums where a band like the Beatles said, "Do you know what? We're not going to just release a bunch of unrelated singles. We're going to release an album of music where each song is connected lyrically, thematically, whatever." And I think, the same goes for here, but
yeah,
in terms of a more sophisticated, longer kind of album, you're asking the audiences only 6 years after the Beatles did Rubber Soul, you're
yeah.
saying, listen, here's our version on what an album is. Give us a chance, because there's only 3 songs. They're all 10 minutes long or longer,
Yeah.
but it's just brilliant, isn't it?
Yeah, it is, and the thing is, the as I said to you, is when the five of them managed to put their personalities into the band's sound. I
Yeah.
think, and it's all about that.
Well, should we
Yeah,
talk about the band? Because that's our next
yeah,
section, the technical
yeah.
musicianship.
Yes, of course.
So what we're going to do, for listeners and viewers, it's hard to sort of pinpoint sections of music in this album because you can't say, oh yeah, let's talk about the verse of Close to the Edge, because what is the verse, But if we have anything to say, we're going to do a little timestamp so that you can sort of pinpoint the thing we're talking about. But for me personally, I'm just going with stuff that I heard over the whole album when we talk about this. So Felipe can do it if he wants. I just want to go through the band, man, because everyone deserves a little bit of time. John
Yeah,
Anderson and his vocals, so distinctive, so defined. It kind of sounds like a hybrid of what's the guy from the Police called? The singer?
Sting,
No, oh no, the other one.
please.
Yeah.
Not the singer, the guitar player. Then
Oh, sorry. Yeah, no, the guitar player.
Andy
Um,
Summers.
Andy. Okay, do you know what? I really messed this one up. That is a bad. And now I'm on caught on video doing it. Yeah, Sting is of course the Police's singer. I don't know
Yeah,
why I had the guitarist in my head, but it does sound a bit like Sting. Just that kind of
yeah.
light voice, reggae. I
How
thought
did I forget about Sting of all people?
can we all just forget this ever happened,
Yeah,
please?
yeah. So we're not gonna edit this out.
No,
Sting will be watching you.
we're authentic in our podcast. We're not going to edit this. John Anderson's vocals, massive range,
Yeah,
clarity in the way he speaks. You can understand every lyric. His
yeah,
falsetto voice, really. I don't know what to say. It kind of conveyed. It really kind of pushed on the audience the mysticism, the themes of the album that were a bit like, oh, spiritual enlightenment. If you think about the verse on "Close to the Edge," rhythmically, he's very bouncy. You know what I mean?
yeah,
It's like this is why I think reggae, because when I hear that part, you can see me now on the video. I'm just bouncing like
yeah,
a reggae
yeah.
song. And but
And he's
despite all of
technically
that,
perfect as well.
that's it.
He's
Despite all
technically
of the
perfect.
rhythmic
Yeah,
complexities, it's still melodic.
yeah,
What a performance, man!
yeah. And the use of vocal harmonies, because that's the thing. They didn't have one good singer. There's three good singers in the band. Steve Howe and Chris Squire also collaborate with vocals, and when you hear the harmonies, especially in Close to the Edge, I think it's just and Do and Die as well. There's like this bits of like two different lyrics going on at the same time, and the way they harmonize is just amazing. And they
Yeah,
always give some room for the vocals. They always like make the instrumentation kind of simpler when there's a lot of harmonies going on, so you can actually hear what they're talking about.
yeah.
And it's beautiful. Like, I think the only rock band that I know well enough to say they have the same sort of how can I put it, quality of vocal harmonies is Queen. Is
Mm,
the only rock band, and
that's a
maybe
good
the
point.
the Beatles, of course. I'll say
Yeah.
Beatles,
Oh,
Queen,
but
and Yes.
Queen and Yes's
Yeah.
harmonies were far more advanced, I think, than the
Yes, yeah,
Beatles.
because the music
Um,
is more complex as well.
exactly.
It
Yeah,
kind of
yeah.
follows what the music is.
Anything else on
Yeah.
John Anderson?
Uh, well, I think no. I think the fact that he was there's an interesting thing. He wasn't an instrumentalist like as good as the other guys, so he
But don't
would
you
play
need
the
that?
acoustic guitar. Yeah, it's
Don't you
like
need that?
he would always have the acoustic guitar and to try to show them where he wanted the songs to go. So he was a singer and a music director, in my opinion.
And I
Yeah,
think
that's it.
that's perfect when you have someone who's there, not saying, and I'm not assuming what Steve, Chris, Rick, and Bill did, but I can imagine that there's parts like where Rick's like, no, we're playing the A major third chord. We need to drop that leading note down to the seventh. And I wonder if John's there, just like, guys, can we just go up to this note? Not trying to theorize anything or make it theoretical or how it should be.
He said in interviews he would be like sweating to kind of with the guitar, trying to show them some sort of riff or chord progression. Like this is where I want the song to go, and they were really good at grasping what the concept was.
Yeah, excellent. So with Steve Howe, we have a multifaceted and multi-skilled guitar player who just, my God, the blend of every bloody style on this album. You've got rock, obviously. You've got jazz sections. You've got classical, acoustic. You've got country playing. And even within guitar styles, he plays electric, he does acoustic, he's got the pedal steel, and he even plays a sitar on this album as well. Just offering so much texture and variety throughout the album. Can you imagine if all we had was, throughout the album, was... I'm trying to think of the recent album we did where we said guitar was just really prominent. It was Blur, where we said that, although they were doing little... motifs and stuff on the guitar, the main part of the guitar for Blur was just this heavy-handed rhythm guitar. Can you imagine if Steve Howe only focused on one or two kind of guitar styles for this album? It would be completely different. There are so many styles. My favorite is
so many instruments as well.
Yeah, exactly. It's just phenomenal. My favorite part is in Siberian Catru. I mean, let me find the timestamp. Kind of like 2 minutes into Siberian Catru, that and you get it all throughout the song, all through the solo section, through the verse section, through just a little instrumental part, but different itineraries of it. He does it on the guitar, then he might do it on acoustic, then he does it on the sitar, then he might play the harmony of that.
Like
slide,
lap steel guitar or pedal steel guitar, I guess.
It's just a phenomenal way of texturalizing one instrument and putting it across the soundboard of the listener.
Yeah, he would pick the right guitar for that specific section of the song. So he alternate. There's moments where he's playing acoustic and playing something that's really like kind of a folk vibe, and then like And You and I has that in the intro, and then he moves into a completely psychedelic bit with bass drum and snare drum and this pedal steel guitar. Just it sounds more like Pink Floyd, if you want, that kind of, which is completely different from the intro. But the way he layers those guitar parts and builds up to the next section is just beautiful. And there's something, if I can make a link between him and Bill Bruford, is they actually refused to be rock musicians, right?
Okay.
Because they were not like, you won't see Steve Howe playing a power chord with distortion on guitar. I never did.
Understood.
That.
I see what you mean.
It's not his thing, and he didn't like hard rock. He didn't like that kind of vibe. And Bill Bruford said in an interview about the moment he joined ES, like, "Oh, I saw myself as a jazz drummer. That's what I wanted to be, and that's what I was doing."
Wow.
And he was just playing, in his head, he was just playing jazz.
Yeah.
So yeah, these guys are singing their harmonies on top of it, whatever. I'm just playing my jazz beats here.
There you go.
And
let's talk about Bill then. Let's talk about Bill.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk about him a bit? Because
well, as a drummer, I have a lot of things to say about him, but I'll try to keep it brief. I think the thing with him is he, unlike all the prog rock drummers at the time, he didn't have a gigantic drum kit. It's a small jazz drum kit.
Right.
Not many cymbals, not many drums. No, not at the beginning, not at the time he recorded with, yes. And he had this amazing way of playing the snare, mixing marching band stuff with jazz and displacing the backbeat, because most of their songs is not like a straightforward 4/4 bar all the way.
Yeah.
So you can't just keep a backbeat with the classic 2 and 4 on the snare drum. So you need to move it around. But the way he does it, no one else could do it. He had this particular sound, and he could make the most out of a really, really simple small drum kit that anyone can buy in a music shop. There's nothing, obviously, good brands, of course. But what I'm saying is, like, it's a basic setup for a drummer, and he was just finding the right sound in the right part of the bar every time.
Isn't this another quality over quantity?
Yes, again,
Less is more
yeah,
again.
less is more for sure. And there's one thing. The other thing about him is like he didn't want to be conventional. He didn't want to do the same thing over and over. To the point that immediately after this album, he quit the band. He didn't do the tour. So Alan White joined them, and I got to put a word about Alan White, who died a few years ago. Phenomenal drummer, and played everything in his own way. And he joined the band for the tour of the album, having to learn those songs in 3 days, which is insane.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah, he did it his own way. I think that he shaped the way the sound of Yes would be over the years. But Bill Bruford created something that is like that will last forever.
Yeah, untoppable
that's
almost.
What it is.
I mean, you can hear through the drumming, he definitely favours that jazz style over sort of rock drumming. You've got the complex polyrhythms, excuse me, syncopated sections, offbeat accents. He loved time signatures, and what was his? I got in my notes his favourites. He loved 5/4 and 7/8, which are quite unusual and unconventional for rock music.
But it also depends on who is writing the song. If they come up with those time signatures, can you be creative at those different time signatures?
Exactly.
He could definitely be one. He quit because I think he believed he achieved everything he could have achieved with that particular band. So Yes was no longer experimental enough for him.
Yeah, and there's an argument for that actually did Yes ever reach the peaks of Close to the Edge again? That's maybe for another episode. But not just. And my final point about Bill Bruford is not just rock drumming, but a variety of percussion, sounds, and textures, which we heard about this ELP.
Yeah,
isn't it?
Exactly.
He did that as well.
Right.
Okay, let's from the drums. Should we go to the bass, the rhythm section partner? Yeah. Chris Squire. I mean, rest in peace. What a dude! What a bass player.
Yeah.
For me, I've said this before. If you could ask me to perfectly define bass playing, it would be the perfect balance between the rhythm of the drums and the harmony of the guitar and vocals. So for me, the perfect bass line, and I'll add it to the playlist right now, is the Lemon Song by Led Zeppelin, because John Paul Jones just has this fantastic way of playing enough notes that you know what the chord is sounding like, but not playing too much that it becomes a solo or a lead instrument. Just go and listen to that song. That, for me, is the definition of perfect bass playing. Chris Squire, however, gets incredibly close here for me. Yeah. You've got everything, bro. Everything. Melodies. Sorry, what are my notes? Melodic playing. Harmonic playing as well. Sometimes he'd play the harmonies. Sometimes he'd be a secondary lead instrument in this album.
Yeah. He uses the higher notes, like that half of
the dusty
the bass,
end, we call it,
that no one uses. He stays there for most of the time. Maybe the dusty end of his is on the lower side.
And there are moments where he is counterpointing, and Rick Wakeman does this as well. If Steve Howe is doing a melody, I'm just making this up, but just for example, okay, if Steve Howe's doing Chris Squire might go which is called counterpoint, which is moving against each other but playing the right notes at a certain time. So much of the times where he's playing the harmony of a melody,
plays with the plectrum I think
and fingerstyle, both of them. Most of the time. And then on top of that, you've also got, that's where he fits in with the melody. The counter melodies, the secondary lead instrument, the harmonies, and then you've got him fitting in with the rhythm, where him and Bill Bruford just completely coordinate to give this precise, syncopated flourish of rhythm that just at some moments in the album you're thinking, my God, like the technicality needed to play this, but at no point actually, do you know what, I think I might blanket this for the whole album. At no point do I really feel anyone is going off on a solo and becoming wanky. I feel like it's all so perfectly crafted, but
it's all intended. It's all intentional. They knew what they were doing. As I said at the beginning, they had a plan. So
my final part about Chris Squire was just his tone, which you get from a famous. It's called a Rickenbacker bass. It's the same bass that Lemmy from Motorhead uses. And that just gives you a really treble heavy tone that when you play it with a pick, it sounds thunderous and you can hear it. There is a distinct, identifiable tone in Chris Squire's bass playing, and it makes the album just like all of their tones do. But yeah, just brilliant. On to Rick Wakeman. Do you want to start off with him?
Yeah, I mean, probably the best keyboard player in the history of rock music. I would put him
I think John
Side by
Lord
Side
gives.
with John
Yeah,
Lord,
yeah, I
and
agree.
that's
Yeah,
it.
yeah.
Those are my top two.
Me too. Me too.
Yeah, seems to be a really fun guy to hang out with. I hope I have a chance to do that one day because Rick Rickman is the funniest guy. Check his Twitter page. He's the funniest. Is it not
Really.
Twitter anymore? Is it
It's
X?
X.
No,
Yeah, yeah.
whatever it is. But yeah, he's really funny, and is and he's got this like approach to music, as relaxed as he is as a person. He's always aiming for perfection. He's always
Yeah.
trying to find the right sound. One story that illustrates his search for the right sound is the fact that he recorded the pipe organ. There's an actual pipe organ close to the edge. He recorded at a church.
Yeah.
Like he got into a church and recorded
You
that
can hear
thing.
it, can't you?
Yeah, and you have that massive echo, and he was really careful with how that would blend with the rest of the song. And
That is
yeah,
at 12 minutes. That's just after 12 minutes for listeners to check out that church organ section. It sounds so big, doesn't it? So
yeah,
daunting.
and he would bring like really quick phrases that sound like classical music and play for a couple of bars and just and then
Well,
do something else.
this is where my research. He had such a deep understanding of classical music and piano, and his playing was phenomenal.
Yeah,
But what you said is he was a session guy, so he understood the modern needs and desires of songwriters for him to go and put modern keyboard techniques
yeah,
on a modern song.
yeah,
Modern for the 70s. So to have that breadth of knowledge,
yeah,
starting from classical music over here and everything in between, and then suddenly getting to modern pop and being able to do everything. His signature throughout the album is simply the amount of different sounds we get. You've got a mellotron, you've got a mini moog, which for early 70s, a mini moog was so unique to have. Not many bands had that kind of synth at that time. Church organ, Hammond organ, and this use of keyboards, it just brought such a, I don't know, in some places it feels orchestral. As we said, the church organ, the classical sections. There is a Baroque solo. So Baroque is like a subgenre of classical music, where they use an instrument called a harpsichord. And I've definitely mentioned this before. When you hit a piano, a connector, when you hit a piano key, a connector goes to the piano and it hits the string like that. And that's where you get a sustain note. Da! With a harpsichord, it pops the note. So you press it down, it goes bop, like that, and that's why it has this digga 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 sound. That is at 3 minutes 15 of Siberian Katra. That is just a perfect Baroque solo. This is what you'd expect to hear in a Johann Sebastian Bach composition. It's expertly done. So you've got that, and then all the way you've just got other solos just using a modern keyboard, and the breadth of sound and the variety is just amazing. So that's what I was saying. He brought an orchestral sound in that sense, lots of classical stuff. But then when he started using the synths, you get this futuristic, sci-fi, progressive sound. Just unreal what the man could do.
Again,
Unreal.
just like Steve Howe, he could bring different instruments and different textures and make them work together. So smoothly. It's just brilliant. One of the best musicians in rock history, not only keyboard players for sure. Yeah. So all of them are great, and they are at the same level. I think that's what a classic lineup is, isn't it? When you find the perfect like 4 or 5 musicians who can really deliver what the band is looking for. Yeah.
Let's talk quickly then about the conceptual depth of the album. I mean, did you look a lot into the lyrics? I know you normally
I
do.
did look into them. I got lost trying to find the meanings of some stuff. Some people would claim there's too hippie, right? But put into context, that was the 70s. Everyone was a bit hippie, wasn't it?
I think so.
And
Everyone a little bit of a hippie chart.
Yeah, there's one thing that I don't want to misquote, so I'm going to get the right phrase. There's one thing that is interesting, which kind of summarizes the whole lyrical content of the album. It's Steve Howe had this line from a song from his previous band that was something. It was close to the edge, down by the river, and then he was literally talking about the Thames River because he lived close to the river.
Right.
And then he showed those lyrics to John Anderson. John Anderson was like, "Whoa, wait a minute. This is about the spirit. This is about humans, finding a path." And he went like, he put a new depth to it. And he said, that's what he said, John Anderson. The river leads you to the ocean. All paths lead you to the divine. Human beings are close to the edge of realization. So that is
Wow.
what it is. So it's a spiritual journey of looking for the divine, and you're never there, but
Yeah, you're
you're
close.
close. You're really close. And so that tension of being close to the edge, but never actually finding the meaning of things. I think there's a lot of it, and I think he is good, really good at writing that kind of stuff.
The lyrics are great. There's so many metaphors. There's lots of
Yeah.
imagery. It feels quite surreal. You know, you really just want to put your head back, close your
Yeah.
eyes, and listen to the words. I mean,
Rick
he was
Wakeman also
inspired.
said that, yeah.
He was
Sorry.
inspired by Hermann Hesse's Siddhartha and a lot
Yeah.
of Eastern spirituality as well.
Yeah, and Rick Wakeman said that in different ways they were all the five of them in a certain spiritual path. They were looking for something. So it's not random. It's not,
That's
and it's
brilliant.
not one guy's view. It's what
Yeah.
the band was feeling at the moment.
My God, this is just such a cohesive album, isn't it? Just
Yeah.
everything links
Well, you
between all
have
five of them. It's phenomenal.
it's the mind, the soul, and the body. When you think about how to execute a phrase in an instrument, you got to have
Yeah.
the technical proficiency. So you got your body needs to be able to do that, and then you have the master plan behind the album as a concept. That's your mind,
Yeah.
and you have your soul into the lyrics, which is the spiritual concept of the album. So it's
Beautifully
literally
put, man.
really well
Beautifully.
balanced.
Lovely, man.
Yeah.
Beautifully put. Cool. And there's a little bit of innovation in this album with the production techniques. I mean, you know, I think we find actually there's a consistent theme that most of those famous albums have something technological that did something better. With this one, you've got them. They experimented with very complex layers because, as you said, in the harmonies, there's so many voices stacked up. Even guitars in Siberian Katra. So one section, I swear you can hear like 4 or 5 of them. You're going to need this complex layering. Editing techniques they used were pretty ahead of their time. Even things like the intro of Close to the Edge, just the birds and those nature
Do you know what
sounds,
that is?
so beautiful.
That's a keyboard, but they just
They
managed to speed up the tapes and loop them. I thought they actually recorded bird sounds and
That's
put in
what
the
I thought.
album. They didn't. That's a
You're
keyboard
joking.
phrase, and they speed it up and made a loop out of it, and that's how
Wow.
the bird sounds come. Yeah, so it's all studio experimentation. I think.
That's crazy.
Yeah, I think I don't know if it was Rick Wakeman who said that they've produced something that was beyond what technology could deliver at the time, and they never did that ever again.
It sounds phenomenal. It
Yeah.
sounds like a raw. Well, I say raw as in you think about how a prog album might sound these days. Lots of production, lots of polish. It's raw in that sense, as in you can hear every instrument being played by the musician, but still the layers and the complexity behind it is really, really massive. Massive well done to Eddie Offord and the band for producing it. Cool.
Yeah.
On to the last part, legacy and the influence of this album. I mean, it is it's one of those albums, as I mentioned, from the late 60s where prog rock started to become a thing to the mid 70s where it had definition. This is what prog rock is, and it was one of those key albums in saying to the world, this is a definitive version of what prog rock is. And what more than that, it went further in terms of making songs ridiculously long, splitting them into 4 parts, making them classical based in terms of their structures. So not only did it put a definition of this is what prog rock is to us, it inspired others after. Genesis started writing longer songs after that album came out. Yeah. It just moved all of them together. It moved the genre of prog rock forward to such an extent that I don't think even Yes were able to comprehend what they'd done and achieved with this album.
Yeah, they all said in different interviews they're still amazed by the album 50 years later, which is impressive.
It's amazing because you're showcasing rock music. It's rock music, but it's intellectually stimulating, it's sophisticated, it's got concepts and deep thematic themes about enlightenment.
And you got the whole, I think Close to the Edge is a long piece with all the information about the album. So it's pretty much all in there. Yeah. And then you have like a beautiful, mostly acoustic piece, which is And You and I, and you end up with the proper rock song, I would say. Siberian Katra has a rock riff at the beginning. It's as close to hard rock as Steve Howe would ever get. So
I was going to say that for me, it's just to sum up the album. You've got 2 incredibly progressive and well-crafted and thought-about songs that required a lot of care, attention to detail, etc., etc. And then at the end with Siberian Katra, it is all those things, but it's just a celebration. It sounds like they're having fun when they're doing Siberian. The other stuff is good, but they've got to be careful. You've got to be precise with the keyboard. Siberian Katra, it's like, let's just have a jam, man, a funky hard rock jam.
And that song was the transition into the next lineup because Alan White was in the studio with them. like hanging out with them during some of the rehearsals and recordings, and he jammed with them. He played Siberian Cat on drums with them.
Nice.
So that was when he first actually played with what would be his band for decades.
Perfect.
Yeah, cool.
And then the final part I have about legacy and influence is that this album just showed to the world that there was an audience for this music, which is what I just said, in the terms of making extra long songs, paving the way for future albums, for Genesis to do their thing, for ELP to come and crack on with their thing, for King Crimson,
Dream Theater. They're big fans of Yes.
That's another part.
The prog metal bands all love them.
Symphonic rock, art rock, prog metal, all of these things have stemmed from albums like this that really showed you could push the boundaries on an album. I really enjoyed it, man. And my thoughts on prog. I'm not normally like a massive lover of it. Shall I do my little... I've got a couple of sentences before Felipe's got his monologue. So there's been a massive newfound appreciation and respect I now have for prog. Again, I've always respected it, but in terms of enjoying it, today has been a new day for me. I normally subscribe to the form of multiple songs on an album, and I tell you why. It's because I listen to an album, and if there's 10 songs on the album and I don't like 3 of them, then I'm like, okay, 70% of the album I still enjoy and I can still like, and But when you've got only 3 songs on the album and they're all over 10 minutes long, it's harder to sort of make that percentage. Because if you don't like 2 of the songs, you're like, okay, well, this album's probably not for me. I don't even like half of it. But I think what I understood this time was that you can't... that there might be, in that 18-minute Close to the Edge, there might be a minute here, 30 seconds there, 4 minutes there that I think, do you know what, it's not entirely for me. I don't really like that riff. That part doesn't work for me. But I think about the effort, the talent, and the craft that it takes to execute a cohesive 18-minute progressive rock masterpiece. I don't ever see myself just putting it on in the car or choosing it to listen to on a random day. It most definitely feels like an experience that you need to have with some headphones on, a dark room. But it's safe to say, however you consume it, it's a fantastic album and a staple in essential prog rock listening. So thank you for suggesting this, bro, because I had a great time with it. Really, I've listened to it about 6 or 7 times. Brilliant.
Amazing. There's a story about Rick Wakeman listening to this in his car.
Okay.
And he was on a highway somewhere or on motorway, and he stopped. He had to stop. That was like 50 years after. He stopped and parked his car and started listening to it. And it was like, how the fuck did we do that? He was amazed by his own work. One quote before my monologue.
Sure.
Roger Dean, the guy who designed the artwork for the album, you've got some of it in your background.
You've got it
some
on yours,
of it on mine. And he designed the logo, which became official logo from that moment onwards, which is the one. Yeah, the first album that had that logo was Close to the Edge. The album cover is just green. There's nothing to it, pretty much nothing to it. And then when you open the vinyl or even the CD sleeve, you have these amazing landscapes. What he said about his art for the album, I think really relates to the music. He said, I wanted to take people to places they can't go any other way.
Wow.
So, those landscapes are not real.
I don't think a sentence so short has so perfectly summed up an album.
It's just that. Perfect, isn't it? That's the only way to go to those places.
I want to give people people to places that they've never been before.
Yeah. Wow. And they can't go any other way. So, can I do my
time for Felipe's monologue? And we've decided now. We thought, well, why the hell is it just Laz doing monologues? Like, if Felipe chooses an album, you've chosen it for a reason, so you should do it. So we're now doing it. That if Felipe chooses the album, Felipe's doing the monologue. If I choose the album, I do the monologue. Which I can't wait, because your monologue last week was amazing.
Thank you very much, sir.
Yeah, no,
I really appreciate your kind words.
Go ahead, bro. Crack on.
So I normally say all the time, I say forgive my French because I swear a lot. I just say forgive my English. But here we go. With 2 new members in the band, Yes has found its classic lineup and produced a masterpiece, Fragile. They have proved to music fans all over the world that they have the musicianship necessary to push the boundaries of prog rock. But the best was yet to come. With Close to the Edge, they were capable of acting more like a group than a bunch of high-skilled musicians. The solos became more complex, the grooves became more ambitious, the vocal harmonies can impress any music lover. Despite all the incredibly well-crafted instrumental and vocal parts, this album is more than anything a spiritual journey into the depths of the human soul. A collaboration between 5 great artists who decided there was still some extra ground to be explored with their talent. Yes has definitely brought us all closer to the edge and made the world rethink what rock music can achieve.
Amazing. Perfect, bro. Perfect. Perfectly summarized. Cool.
That's
Anything
it.
else? Or are we done?
Yeah. Are you guys
We
feeling
done?
closer to the edge?
I certainly am.
This
Yeah.
album's great.
Anyway.
Yeah.
Thank you guys. Thank you for joining us for another episode of the Long Live Rock and Roll podcast. We hope you come back. If you're watching us on YouTube, make sure to hit like and subscribe to stay up to date with new videos. We've got episodes coming out every week, which will be a new album, a new band, or a new discussion point. If you're listening on Apple, Spotify, or Amazon, make sure you follow us on those platforms. But do us a favour, it takes 20 seconds of your time, scroll down, give us 5 stars, write a nice little sentence about us. It's just going to make the world of difference because we'll shoot up the charts. We'll be seen by more people like you guys because we do this all off our own backs. We're an independent podcast and we do it because, as I hope you can see and hear, we love music. We love rock and roll and we love rock music. So yeah, we're going to keep doing this for a long time. Email us with suggestions, let us know your thoughts on the episodes, and thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for everyone for being with us one more time. If you haven't listened to this album yet, or if you have it long ago, give it another spin. Enjoy it. It's a great album.
Stop on the motorway when you're doing 70 miles an hour. Park the car and listen and just think, how the hell did this guy do this?
Bloody amazing.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, keep on rocking, everyone, and don't do anything I wouldn't do.
And as usual, guys, take care and long live rock and roll.